About a year ago, I heard that Kirk had given a presentation to another chapter in the Denver area. I think it was Denver West, and I thought, wow, that's pretty cool. So I looked into it a bit and realized that Kirk lives in Colorado. And so I asked him if he'd be willing to speak with Cutthroat chapter or speak to, and he said, yeah, I'd be delighted to. So I'm really very happy to have Kirk join us tonight. For those of you who don't know Kirk, he's a member of the Trout Unlimited National kind of senior executive committee. He is vice president and editor-in-chief of Trout Unlimited Media, Marketing, and the Communications Group. He's also editor at large for Field and Stream, and the editor of Angling Trade, the business-to-business media group that covers fly fishing in North America. He's the author of several books, most notably The Little Red Book of Fly Fishing, and also Trout Tips, great book that I have, and Trout Magazine from Trout Unlimited, which is a great publication. His work has appeared in Wired, Outside, Men's Journal, the New York Times, USA Today, Garden and Gun, and many other publications. Known for his offbeat, out there story angles, he's covered fishing on 5 continents, from the tip of Tierra del Fuego in Argentina to the north of the Arctic Circle in Russia, from the Tasmanian highlands to the Amazon jungle. So quite a world traveler. Kirk lives in Steamboat Springs with his wife, Sarah. And so we're delighted to have you with us tonight, Kirk. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you all. Thanks for having me. It's I wish I could be there in person with you all, but it's nice to see your faces, and we'll chat along. Those of you who have met me before know that I'm try to be pretty easygoing and loose on these types of things, and I'm happy to talk about whatever you want to talk about. So if you want to grab me by the shirt sleeve and say, you know, why in the world did you run that story in Trout Magazine? I'm happy to answer that, or other things. First, Alan, I have to say, go blue. How about them Wolverines? Not our year, but I'm a Michigan.
Not our year at all.
It's almost basketball season. I'm a Michigan grad, so.
Oh, great! Didn't know that.
I saw that behind you, so I had to say something. But happy to talk about the Little Red Book of Fly Fishing. Of course, I co-authored this with the great Charlie Myers, who was a mentor of mine, and I'm sure a friend to many of you, and so forth. So happy to chat about that. And but I thought I would start with sharing my screen and doing a little PowerPoint. I actually talked to a chapter in Ann Arbor, Michigan last week, and I also fielded some questions. People are kind of wondering, and from this group too, about COVID. I don't want to go too far into it, but it's been an interesting phenomenon that's affected fly fishing in general, and also TU. And I can tell you how we've adapted and what's going on, and I think it'll be interesting. So I've got a few slides on that, and then we'll talk about some tips and the Little Black Book of Fly Fishing. This is the Little Red Book. The Little Black Book is the sequel that was to come out 10 years later, and it looks like this right now. It's still, because the publisher's in New York and they've shut down for the summer. So we're getting there. But so I'll hit share screen and go. And if you have questions, please put them in the chat, raise your hand, whatever. And then we'll make some time at the end to talk about, answer questions and do whatever you want. And nothing is off base or off limits. And I'm happy to, it's nice to play a home game here in Colorado.
And so I'm about to mute everyone. If you have a question for Kirk, please put it in the chat box, and he'll be checking the chat box periodically. And then there'll also be questions and answers at the end where we'll turn on all the mics.
Is Kirk in a big box? I only see him in a small box.
I have him spotlighted right now. But right now you should be seeing his screen. Is that what everybody's seeing now?
Yes.
Okay, here we go.
So this is what it feels like now, right, in this country. And I'm not going to do any politics or any of that. I've just had this.
Okay, Kurt, you're going to have to unmute yourself.
Said can you hear me okay now?
You're
All
fine
good?
now. Go right
Great.
ahead.
Thank you. So I said that this is a crazy time in this country and it feels weird and all that. I'm not going to get into any heavy issues, but I had an artist designer for us make this for me several years ago, and I thought it was appropriate to show. So fly fishing our way through. And let me see here. I'm going back to COVID. So what we did, COVID obviously changed a lot of things for us. We were going great guns in the spring, and then pandemic kind of hit in March, and the media arm that I work with TU kind of went into overdrive. A lot of our groups had to wait and see till things were safe. They could get out and work on rivers and so on and so forth. But the demand was immediate for communication. And we received a grant from the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation to promote responsible recreation. And we did that, and we created these little 2-ply net gaiters too in trout colors, and encouraged people to stay socially distant and to, not drive to the river together and to kind of fish hyper local and all those things. And we shepherded this along through that first wave, and the mission continues. It's getting grim again, and we need to buckle down more. But we were so successful with these masks and our communication and the podcast that we did and the Instagram and social media and everything that we did, that we National Fish and Wildlife Foundation asked for masks like this for all their employees. So we sent them 150 masks, and then they doubled the grant. So that was a key. It was several $100,000 that helped the national organization get through and pay the salaries and not lay anybody off and keep things moving along. And then we doubled down also. While we have a phenomenon now that people couldn't go to bowling alleys and theaters and t-ball leagues and things like that. And so where did they go? They found the river. And it's been, I think, quite a moment for the sport of fly fishing as a whole. It's a good news, bad news scenario. I mean, some of us found some of our favorite places busier than ever, but there's also been more focus and more people on the water who care about clean water. And so our trial memberships are up, and in fact, a lot of our stuff is up right now. We also had a lot of media. We were in the New York Times. A lot of that was fueled by the Pebble Mine fight and the apparent win there, but it's not over. I can fill you in on where we stand with that in a little bit, but big wins for our group in terms of Wall Street Journal, New York Times, Washington Post, Politico, CNN, and elsewhere.
Pardon me, Kurt.
Yep.
Pardon me. Cindy asks, are those gators on the previous page still available?
So thank you for the question. Unfortunately, fortunately, we made 3,000 of them, and we sold them all out in 3 days. But we're going to make, we think, I'm in negotiations now, we're going to do a cutthroat trout version of them, and we're going to make them 3-ply across the front, and hopefully we'll have those within the next few weeks. So that's where we are with that.
Thank you.
You bet. So meanwhile, we had to do our regular day jobs. We put out Trout magazine, and at a time when ad revenues were down and people were scared and so on and so forth, we were able to put that out without a dip, and our revenue button on our website went crazy. And so we've done well. We've gotten well above past donations and well above past signups. So that's also really been good for us. And here, I won't bore you with the specific details, but if you look at some of these numbers, you can see that, fiscal year 21 compared to 20 is statistically significantly higher. And I think that that's because of more conscience and more ramped up work that we've been doing. So we've also been collaborating. We're very busy. Our team, I have a team of about 20, all told, counting regional folks. And we've been going pedal to the metal. But to create all this content is a lot of work. So we've been partnering with other organizations like Backcountry Hunters and Anglers. You might have received an email from Chris Wood encouraging you to join BHA. And BHA sent an email to all their members encouraging them to join Trout Unlimited. Now's the time to bond together, because with this uptake in water, people using rivers and lakes, there's never been a greater need for public access and clean water. So, and we've gotten about 200 members each from that one little email. And we're going to continue that campaign with BHA, working with Fly Lords, younger group, the American Fly Fishing Trade Association. And then some of the companies have really stepped up, and Umpqua and Sims and Orvis are amongst those. Many, Scott, Rods, Abel, Ross, a lot of great companies have been really bonding together. It's been, as someone who's covered the industry for a long time, it's been a real heartwarming to see how people have come together. And so that's that. Of course, what's the phenomenon that we're seeing now is that, you know, we were worried as an organization, we always worry about having an aging demographic and membership, right? Or being older, perceived as older. Well, if you've been on the river, as I know many of you have this year, who you're seeing a lot on the river are families, and especially younger families. And this is my friend Tim Romano, who's been my business partner and photographer, has traveled with me to many of those places around the world. These are his daughters and his boat going down the Colorado River. So it's really a great opportunity, we think, as far as families and reaching out that way and helping and so forth. We see it as an opportunity, as long as we can all stay safe. Of course, there's a downside. I don't think I went to my favorite boat ramps this year and didn't see this ever. And days when I went in September on a Wednesday morning, when it was usually one trailer at the ramp, there were 20 trailers. And that's something that we as an industry are thinking about, concerned about, and have to work on, because we don't want to, suffocate ourselves under the pressure that we've found without being able to manage and share. And some folks don't know, most of the people who are on the rivers now are do-it-yourselfers. This is the Colorado River like last month. And, you know, everyone's having fun at do-it-yourselfers, but I think we're urging patience, and we're going to work with AFTA and Orvis and guides and others to try to figure out ways to get the most out of this, but also make sure that people are respectful and ethical and keeping things clean and respecting boundaries and all of that. So that's phase one of my talk. And I'm going to, well, there's my dog at cocktail hour. But then I'm going to stop sharing my screen and go back to the live conversation and answer some questions now. And then we'll dive in with a little bit more interesting big fish pictures and tips and exotic travels around the world and that kind of stuff. So does anyone want to talk about this? I see something. Ah, yes. Buzz.
Down here.
Buzz, I got your message, and I know I
I'm
appreciate
eating
it.
dinner and, you know, blah, blah, blah. So
Go ahead.
I have no question. Thanks for making a presentation, though.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm going to get into Tasmania in a little bit. That's part of the next one. So, so the point we are also right now, though, because we're right in the middle of this, and things are as everyone knows, you read the news and watch the news, it's going to be hunker down time here again and take care of each other. We fully expect these trends, even if, and we hope for the vaccine. I heard some of the conversation earlier. I hope for the vaccine, and I know that everyone feels like a rubber band and they're going to get shot out to their favorite spots and travel and get on planes and do all that as soon as they can. But we think that this phenomenon of people finding rivers is going to stick at least in through next year. And I know the manufacturers are like, you can buy a kayak today if you wanted to, and fly rods were in short demand. And some companies played it right and some didn't. And I can answer questions about that too. It was very, very interesting summer as far as products.
Cindy, I've got a question.
Sure, go ahead.
I just had a thought. With all this big influx, you know, and same with how we have with the ski industry, it seems like we might need to create more educational opportunities for all these people who are throwing themselves out there, who are not picking up any good habits, who are not learning how to properly cast fish, hold on to the flip, you know, deal with the fish, hook them. You know, I'm wondering what can we do that we can create more education, especially the ethics side, as well as the skill side, with all these new people that we have.
I think that's the $64,000 question, and my answer or my feeling is you mix equal parts in the cake of service content. In other words, helping people become better anglers and enjoy more success and appreciate things, and then the ethics and respecting boundaries, respecting resource, and instilling that feeling that you have to be a steward as much as a participant. We don't want guides, for example, just merely taking people for boat rides. That's not productive. We want people to connect with the sport itself and to vest themselves and to become part of the community. And so I don't think anyone can do that alone, but I can tell you that we're already in talks with Orvis, the Fly Fishing Trade Association, Sims, Farbank, which is Reddington, and so forth. Mm-hmm. And we're going to put together programs and collaborate on that, tackle that as an industry, and TU is going to be right in the middle of all that.
Yeah, good.
Orvis already has a really good program with their Fly Fishing 101 and 201 classes, which are free. One thing I wanted to just is I had an idea for Angling Trade for an article. Brian is now our vice president of the TU chapter. He came to us about 6 years ago to the Cutthroat chapter and proposed a partnership, essentially. And it's been quite a ride. His Park Meadows Orvis store is #1 in the country now for the Fly Fishing 101 and 201 classes. I think it went up to #3 in total sales. He's recruited all of the instructors for his class out of the TU chapters. He's brought us grants for various programs. It's been a very productive partnership, and I think it's fairly rare to see a retail brick and board location like that and a conservation group in a partnership.
Yeah, you're right, and the story gets even deeper than that. However, obviously in the time of COVID, they're not able to do as many 101 and 201 classes. So years past, Orvis has been a main source for our free trial memberships. And yet this year we were able to go and extend that through offering to first responders and those types of folks free
Veterans partnership.
Yep, veterans partnership and all that. And Orvis is leaning on us to help buoy them through this. So we're partnering, and we did our life campaign with them, bought rods last year from them when their rod shop was looking bleak. The only people that were buying 500 fly rods at a time was Trout Unlimited. And the first people that we called were Orvis. And we kept them in business when their rod shop working and functioning. April and May and June last year, and they remember that. We have a very deep, cohesive relationship with Orvis. I will follow up on that story, especially as we get to rekindling those one-on-one classes and live events again.
I'm probably one of the few people here that reads Angling Trade regularly.
I like that. I like it. That's awesome.
Yeah,
And
and
I like
I
the
think the other nice thing about that partnership is that it's given the members an opportunity to meet each other and spend time with each other. Because, you know, when we're out fishing, you tend to go apart. Or we're out doing conservation projects, we tend to go apart, right? You're planting over here, I'm planting over there.
Yeah.
But it's been a great way for all of us to be together in one place, helping others.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, Orvis Park Meadows too has hosted fly tying events at their shop. Probably 40 of the best fly tyers in the state
So
tying. We've had Rick Takahashi and Rim Chung and all kinds of people coming in to tie at the shop, and it draws in people for the shop itself, and it's really good for the fly tyers.
well, I can tell you that the next boom is going to be fly tying when it's winter. So all the manufacturers and so forth, I don't know if you're able to get all the materials you need now, but if you can't, you might be too late. And if you can, you might stock up, because it's going to be the winter of tying, and everyone, that's the buzz from the underground on all that stuff. So
I talked to Tony Creations in Montana regularly, and he is inundated for all of the foam cutters
yeah,
that he produces for
Yep.
things like Morris hoppers and Morris knives, stealth bombers, crease flies, all kinds of different. He's got dozens and dozens of different foam cutters and wing cutters.
Well, I'm going to move on to the next part, because someone told me they also wanted to see some cool fish and hear some fun stories and talk about that stuff. So I'm going to share my screen again.
So
And
I'm
we'll
going to go back to muting everyone, and Kurt, unmute yourself to continue, please.
Thank you. I'm vamping. Okay, now I'm back.
We can hear you just fine, Kurt.
We'll do this one. So I mean, I'm bumming bad, because my deal was I love to travel and do interesting stories, and with Field and Stream and so forth, and going back to the day. So this is a little sketch that I ripped off from Picasso of Don Quixote, and that's Fish Quixote. And you'll notice that Don Quixote has the fly rod, and Sancho Panza is a spin fisherman. So I come actually from the upper Midwest. I grew up in Wisconsin, went to school in Michigan, and learned to fish on the Baldwin River, which is where the first brown trout were planted in the United States in 1883. And they were planted off a railroad trestle, similar, not the same one that I'm standing on there, but similar to it, in that kind of water. And so brown trout, ironically, has taken me all over the world. I learned to fly fish to impress the father of a girl I was dating, and I went up to visit them at the cabin, and her dad immediately sent me down the river with a fly rod and waders. And I was a gear fisherman from Wisconsin, but about an hour or two later, I noticed my girlfriend was walking down the bank, and her mom had sent her downstream with a sandwich and an apple and a paper sack and a Coke. And she yelled down, "Are you okay?" And so they thought I was lost. And I asked, "Do I have to come back yet?" At which point her father knew I was the one. She kind of slunk back, but I was the one. And we've been married for 31 years now. So, and this is still our family cabin back in Michigan. It's where we go every June. So travels have taken me. My favorite trip of all might have been the one that I caught the least fish. I caught 2 fish in a week in Ireland, but just ancestral roots and all of that. And this is fishing in the ridge pool on the River Moy, which is the beautiful thing about fishing the ridge pool is you fish, cast to step down, cast and step down. And when you get down to the end, you're sharing the beat with 3 other anglers. And when you get to the end, you go up to Doherty's bar and you have a Guinness in your waders. And then you go to the top. It's all timed out very carefully so that the Guinness is included. This is an Arapaima, one of the most interesting trips I've done. This was in South America in Guyana, and they said that I was the first media person to catch one of these. I like to go early and be the first to do stories in certain places and find different angles. And believe it or not, you can still find plenty of angles. But, you know, it's a small world. And that was dinner one night while we were down there in Guyana. Also fished a lot in Brazil and with the Kayapo people on the River Iriri and the Xingu. And this is in central Brazil. It's like a 4-hour flight from Manaus, landing on a dirt strip. And you can see the encroachment of civilization by the lighter in the ear of the second in command there. But this is the chief checking out the flies. These are the defenders of the rainforest. But it was interesting while I was there, a lot of the same issues apply. There's indigenous communities in Alaska that were trying to protect their way of life, and fishing is the catalyst for that. And it's no different in the jungle. I would encourage anybody who has a chance to visit. I think the new frontier of the fishing, you know, unpressured fish, going to the distance and all that, finding these wild things. I think that we're in the golden age of jungle fishing, what the golden age of the big 5 hunting and safari was in Africa over 100 years ago. I think that what's happening right now in South America is the Hemingway story from Africa 100 years ago. If you get a chance, it's not, some places are very expensive, but some places are not. And it's certainly worth the adventure. I was part of the group that went and we camped in the jungle for 2 weeks. We're dropped by plane, and before there was ever a lodge there. This was the exploratory trip before Simone Lodge was built. I was the one American, and there were 4 Argentines and 1 Brazilian and me. And we became the Hermanos de Selva, the Brothers of the Jungle. It was a great experience and a great story that became a feature in Field and Stream magazine. And I slept with a 9mm under my head every night that was loaned to me by the colonel of in the Bolivian army base right nearby before we flew into the jungle because of the cats, big jaguars. So anyway, I have noticed a couple tips from these trips, and these are, the thing with the little black book is compared to the little red book is the black book is more advanced and a little bit more international in flavor. So we're doing trips, and I now even here in Colorado, I fish streamers with eyes more often than not. Big fan of Argentina, and that's wind, you know, casting in the wind, and I'm happy to answer any questions about that. Making friends in the wind is the key to fishing in the Bahamas or Argentina. But it's all about the back cast for casting in the wind. Chile, so on. One thing that I found in the travels is that it's weird, but we try to beat the fish into submission. Like they're going to take it this, if they don't eat it this time, they'll eat it next time for sure, right? Well, not often. And almost every other place in the world will switch flies after the first refusal, or they know the fish saw the fly but didn't eat it. It's from Canada. And all fishing is about changes. You know this stuff, that's old stuff. This is a great photo, my favorite photo from Kodiak Island in Alaska, because the orange thing on the pontoon by the plane is a life preserver wrapped around a case of Budweiser beer. And they were going to drop that into the river. And the guide, you can see, is really focused with the net. And so it was nice to be able to radio in that we were out up here. But that was in 2010, and that was the 10th steelhead that I caught on October 10th, 2010. So that's a 10-10-10 fish. And one of those things that we do here is we kind of stand in the same place. So I like to cast a little, move a little, cast a little, move a little. So I'm going to blow through some of these. This is Iceland. Big fan of Iceland. Also a big fan of, if you looked at my terrestrial box now, I don't have 100 different colors. That's almost all black and white or tan. It's all about shape when I fish terrestrials. And I don't know if you feel that way, but that's how I'm feeling there. And Russia, Atlantic salmon, flying in the MI8 helicopters, MI2, but the biggest lesson there was never go into a lunch tent with 2 Russian anglers and a bottle of vodka. So, and this is the other side of Russia, 11 time zones away in Kamchatka. And we fished an MI2 helicopter there and caught massive rainbow trout. And if you wonder about if we think that rainbow trout are so timid, they eat little RS2s and everything. There, they just crush them out. It's like you throw a mouse in the middle of the river and it's like a missile gets shot off the side of the bank. And then we etched it into the side of the helicopter. You all believe that, I'm sure. And then my favorite places of all are New Zealand, South Island, all walking, all stalking, 1 cast, 2 casts. It's just top of the game, dry fly fishing, I think. And it's all about waiting and getting into position. And then the latest trip that I took, and you might have seen the story, and you commented on this in the thread here, but this is Tasmania. And the first place that I go, people ask me, when you get to go somewhere, when this all lifts and the fog clears and the pandemic's behind you, where are you going? And my answer is I'm going to Tasmania. It's the first place where brown trout were introduced. So it's kind of a symbolic part of my personal journey in fishing. And even though they have tiger snakes there, it's just stunningly beautiful with caddis flies and so on and so forth. So I just blow through a bunch of pictures and then open up for questions, but anyone want to talk about any of that or have questions about tips, or now if you want to talk about media, or you got a story you want to run, or you want me to consider putting you in the magazine and you take pictures, or any of that, it's all fair game. So
folks, I think you can unmute yourself and go ahead and ask Kirk a question.
You were talking about streamer fishing, Kirk.
Yeah.
And for the last 2.5 years, I've been fishing mice almost exclusively. I fished them in Patagonia. I've caught bluegills on them. I've caught a whole bunch of smallmouth right by my house by Chatfield Reservoir. And it's been a blast. Fishing mice is what I call dry fly streamer fishing, because you don't have to wonder if you had a hit.
No, there's very little mystery to mouse fishing, isn't there? And where I learned to mouse fish was in Michigan, and we'd go out in the middle of the night and wear tinted headlamps and try to feel our way down the Pere Marquette River and cast by sound into banks, and you catch some big fish. But I've realized fishing places like the Green and even the Colorado, I'll swing a mouse or like a bomber pattern that looks like a mouse in the middle of the day, at 2 o'clock in the afternoon in July. And sometimes they'll hit it. And you can rest assured that if they do hit it, it might not be the biggest fish, but it's a tough fish. It's an ambitious fish. So, and we like those. So
I've fished almost always in broad daylight.
yeah.
And I've had tons and tons of fish hit, big fish, small fish. I've got in some cases, I've reacted and set the hook, and I'll watch my mouse sail past me with a 3-inch largemouth on it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I'll go after it. I've caught 3 or 4-inch smallmouth on it in Chatfield. I've sent some of my mice all over the place. I know Jack Dennis sent me a picture of his daughter with a brown that he caught on one of my mice. And Jeff Courier sent a picture of a bass. And I can't remember the name of the other fish from the Amazon that he caught on. He said he lost one to a tiger fish in Uganda.
Yeah.
But I met him at the fly fishing show because I've tied at that for about 20 years, and gave him a bunch of mice, mailed them to him, and he's taken them all over the world.
Yep. Well, nothing to add to that. I do have, you mentioned Jack Dennis, and Jack Dennis, I've got a Little Red Book Charlie Myers story. So, and I don't tell a whole lot of Charlie stories. Really miss him a lot, and he meant a lot to me. But we were fishing on the Grays River outside of Jackson, Wyoming, and we had been on this TU trip. This was before I was with TU, and I was with Field and Stream, and we were covering the Wyoming range and trying to stop oil and gas development on the Tri-Basin Divide there to protect the 3 distinct species of cutthroat trout that you can catch walking from one basin to the next. But we got flat tire after flat tire because the road was filled with jagged rocks and so forth. And I was with Charlie on the last day. Everyone had taken off in different directions. The tour had ended, and Charlie wanted to stay on Sunday, fish the Grays, and then we were going to blast back to Denver through the middle of the night. So we fished, and sure enough, we get a flat tire, and all Charlie's got is a teeny little donut. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, it's Sunday afternoon. We're, what? And Charlie's like, we're going to keep fishing. We're going to keep fishing. It's not going to be a problem. I said, how are we ever going to get home? Finally, we fished until almost dark, and we roll into Jackson at 8 o'clock on Sunday night. He says, I'm going to call my buddy. He called Jack Dennis, and Jack Dennis called the Big O tire guy, who was his buddy, walked into the shop, fixed our flat, put us back on the road, and we drove through the night to get back to Denver. And as we were driving through the night, to keep us awake, as we were driving through the dry wash, we came up with the idea of writing a Little Red Book of Fly Fishing together, and that's how this book was started. So, who else has a question? I'm better at questions than I am at straight up presentations via Zoom.
By the way, that's
Intrigued by your, Kirk, I was kind of intrigued by your comment, show a fly once and then change.
Yeah.
So can you expand on that, please?
Sure. There's a really important, and it's not just, it's really the case in New Zealand, right? But if you'll see a fish, you're sight fishing to a fish. There are 2 things that they'll do. First of all, if you imagine that the fish is directly behind a car, put an imaginary car in the river, and the fish is behind the license plate of the car, in the center of the back of the car. In New Zealand, they'll intentionally throw their fly at the taillights. In other words, askew 1 foot or 2 foot to the side, knowing that the water is clear and the fish is going to see that in its peripheral vision. So they'll cast to the taillight in the main current side. If the fish is on the edge of the river left, you're not going to cast to the slack water to the left, but the taillight to the right. So intentionally 2 feet off to the right. And if they know that the fish has seen that fly, they'll change it right then. Typically, they'll size down. So they'll go from a size 16 parachute atoms to a size 18 or 20 parachute atoms to an ant to an emerger kind of suspended with, and then to a nymph deeper, and then move on. So, and I've also seen that in a lot of other places, but I started doing that here. And if you're willing to switch, and I don't know, honestly, if it's, I think part of it is that you're also, just to tie the fly on, you're taking time. So you're giving the fish time to settle down and rest.
Yeah.
Then you hit them again. So I think part of it's the timing factor, but I also think showing them a different pattern is really, really important. And when I was, 25 years old, I would say, well, God darn it, they'll eat this cast, or they'll eat this cast, and we'll never beat a smart trout into submission. They're not going to, like, all of a sudden decide, okay, fine, this time I'll eat it.
Yeah, right.
uh,
What about cast and move?
Cast and move is when you're swinging streamers, okay?
Yep.
A lot of people stay stationary, and you have to have movement. This is a trick from Tierra del Fuego, fishing for the big brown trout down there. If you're not moving at least 3 strides sideways, you're either telegraphing that you're coming to the fish, and usually when you're swinging a streamer, they're not feeding fish, they're territorial fish, right? You want something to show up, them to get angry and grab it, like a steelhead or an Atlantic salmon, or even some of the trout here. So you want to swing it, show it to them, and move on. If you move too fast, you'll pass fish. But if you move too slow, it's an even greater problem because you'll telegraph your presence to the fish. So you'll find that there's a perfect tempo of stepping, and I've found it to be about 3 sideways paces between every streamer cast as I'm working a run down the river.
Interesting.
When fishing a mouse pattern, are you using it like a streamer? How are you fishing that?
I fish it. If I'm in a boat or going downstream, I'm fishing at the bank. Sometimes I let it hit the weeds and fall out like a regular mouse would, right? And then I swing it. I sweep it and swing it. Try to make it awake. With the mouse pattern, if you do too much popping or too much, fish know what mouse look like when they swim. And if you make it so that it's ripping along at 40 miles an hour, it looks like Miss Budweiser hydroplane boat, and no fish is going to eat that. But if you throw it at a gentle 45-degree angle downstream, tight to the bank, make one mend, drop your rod tip, and then let it swing, it kind of makes a perfect little V wake. And another way to do that is to fish just a bomber fly. I think that the fish are more interested in the wake than they are in the profile of the mouse itself. I think they're interested in the action. They see something like that and they see it wake and they move. And that elicits that strike. I don't know that for sure. Another way to do that is you can tie a riffle hitch on your fly and it kind of cocks the fly a little bit sideways and sweeps that way. I every time I fish mice, or I try to like fish bombers or like skate pink wogs for silver salmon, I'm going for that like nice little tight V current driven wake as opposed to a dramatic pop or splash or something like that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Who else has a question? See, these
That's
I like.
interesting.
Now I'm in my comfort zone.
I fish my mice almost entirely in still water, and I'll do a pop and stop, essentially. Pop it, stop, pop it, stop. And that seems to elicit the best strike. But I do find that the noise contributes, the popping.
Yeah, I think noise is an underappreciated factor in all fishing, positive and negative, right? If you look at, I've done a lot of time in scuba masks. I did a series of story for Field and Stream called Going Deep in the Name of Trout Research, where I wore a scuba tank and I went in the South Platte River and I sat down in like an 8-foot bucket. And I think it's better than with snorkels because you can go down and hang onto a rock and actually watch as things happen. And so you blend in with your environment and the fish don't freak out if you're standing there, sitting down there for more than like 20 seconds. Why? Because they've never seen a 6-foot long bubble blowing blob before in their life, right? They don't know how to react to that. But when you watch the fish behave and you're down there, the number one thing that freaks them out is shadows overhead. So a bird flies over, fish do this. It's definitely shadows. So think about that the next time you're false casting or where you're positioning your body as you're casting into the river. And number two is noise. So I can bang my tank and they do this, or scratch your feet on with gravel and cleats walking up to the fish. That bothers them. I went to New Zealand and the first guide, and I was all proud of myself. I got these new Patagonia boots, which I love the Patagonia boots, but they had the tractor metal bars on the bottom. And he made me unscrew them and put them in the lodge and leave them there until we got done. Would not tolerate scratching rocks as we tried to sneak up on fish. So other questions. I'm happy to keep on rolling. I don't want to keep anybody up past their bedtime or anything, but like I love answering these questions. This is my favorite part of the whole thing.
You mentioned that we're entering the era of the jungle.
Yeah.
Yeah, can you expand on that?
Sure. So there are a lot of places in fly fishing that, there's a search to go find exotic places, some far out atoll that's never been fished in the middle of the Pacific Ocean or some point above the Arctic Circle in Russia that hasn't been fished. That's all true. But what I found about the Amazon in particular is it's so big, it's so vast, and there's still so little understood. Like by comparison, American anglers have really gone to New Zealand a lot. They've really gone to Russia a lot. They've gone to Iceland a lot. They've gone to other places. They're starting to go to South America more and more. But, if you're an angler and we live in Denver, you can connect through Houston and be in Manaus in, 7 hours. It's not flying 15 hours around the world. It's not flying all the way to Tierra del Fuego. And when you fly over the Amazon, it's weird because you fly over the Caribbean and the ocean to get down to South America, and you still see the lights of islands and boats and all that stuff. It's interesting. But when you get over the heart of the Amazon, it's pitch black. There's nothing there. And it's at once eerie and inspiring. And I can tell you this, when you go there, the sounds and the smells stick with you forever. There are still times at night when I lay down and I'm sort of starting to fall asleep and I hear the sound of the jungle. And it's really a cool phenomenon. It's a really interesting thing.
Yeah. Awesome.
What else can I answer? Anyone got questions? Anyone want to talk business? Talk about Trout Unlimited?
What about can you talk about the effects of the fires on rivers in Colorado at all?
Yeah, and we were having such a good time until now.
Yeah. Well,
I fear I'm trying to get a hold of this in my media mind, but I fear these fires this year might be the greatest natural disaster impacting trout fishing in the United States in more than a generation. Like you maybe argue the 1988 Yellowstone fires. And we had terrible fires in California before, but like these fires where they were on the Poudre and on the headwaters of the Colorado River, and depending on what happens with snowpack, runoff, siltation, all that, it's going to be a big deal. And one of my biggest jobs now is talking to our science team and asking them, what can we do? Even little baby steps. Someone asked if it burned over the Fraser. It's like that's the best thing that happened with that fire is that it didn't burn over the Fraser.
mm-hmm.
So.
Well, it's certainly of interest to us. I mean, we're always looking for ways that we can help with conservation projects locally. So we'll be keeping our eyes open terms
Thank
of
you for that. Thank you for that. And I would say that for those of us who live in Colorado, that's going to be the big one. That's going to be the one that we all need to tune into. Because I think there are some things that we can do, planting, helping. We got to figure it out. Everyone's in a daze now because it just happened.
Yeah.
But that's one that we can rally around. And frankly, I said to my colleagues at TU, I mean, this is where you show your stripes, right? This is why people pay to be members.
Yep.
They want cold, clean, fishable water. We got to do what we can to make the Colorado cold, clean, and fishable again.
Mm-hmm.
Someone on a thread.
And I should say that the Cutthroat chapter has made a significant donation to the Colorado River Headwaters chapter just for that purpose. And it's a great example of cooperation between different chapters. And we're delighted to do that. And because we're concerned about the effects of the fire on the Colorado.
Well,
Yep.
you're really great for doing that, and I appreciate it. And I know sometimes people don't want to, necessarily take a bow, but we can do a story about that kind of stuff. And I want to be watching the collaboration that happens amongst the Colorado chapters to rally behind this river because it's an iconic river.
We're all one to you.
Yeah, all one to you. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
I'm curious what type of form that would take. We did a planting project in a watershed drainage area. It involved annular grasses that would turn the area green, then die off, and then on top of that you have perennial wild seed on top of that. Is that a similar effort that we would need to do to such a quote unquote damaged area, or something to help it along?
I think some sort of mitigation that would keep just straight ash and dirt from flowing down the river.
Mudslides.
Yeah.
Mudslides. That's the biggest risk right now.
Mm-hmm.
And because mudslides have reciprocal effect, right? So the mud gets in the river, it turns it cloudy, but what does it do? It covers up the gravel.
Yeah.
What lives in the gravel? The bugs.
It smothers it.
It smothers it. There's no hatches.
Right.
There's no food. There's
Right.
no food, no fish. That's what we're worried about.
I know for the Hayman area, they put in a lot of sediment traps, specifically hay bale sediment traps and things of that nature to keep a lot of the sediment out of the streams because you'll get a lot of mudslides and debris slides.
That's right. So I'm not the scientist, and I don't want to speak for the scientists. I'm the guy who gets people fired up when the scientists tell us what we have to do. So as soon as I find out what they tell me to get you fired up about, I will.
Wasn't that an issue too with Windy Gap that it had a lot of sediment in it, and that's why they want to do that bypass?
That's exactly
And that's pre-fire.
That's exactly why they wanted to do the bypass. That's exactly right.
Yeah, and so
It's all
now,
about
and now
sediment.
it's pre-fire before the sediment now that's going to come in from the fire.
So,
Yeah, like double the problem.
all the hard work that went in to make this, like to get to this point, in literally one day, I was there in Kremlin when I was driving up to Steamboat and I stopped and watched. The fire went from 18,000 acres to 148,000 acres in one day.
One day.
Yeah, one day I was watching how big these fires were. It's
We
never
could,
seen
we
anything
could, we
like
could
it.
see it from here
Could
in
you?
Centennial. I'm looking out this window right now in Centennial, Colorado, and I could see the big smoke plume.
Yeah, it was nuts. It was something.
It was
I've seen a lot of
intense.
fires and stuff. This has been
Yeah.
quite.
That's been a really harsh fire season. Yeah, and I agree with the blissful ignorance, but at least we can come up with the right questions
Yeah, right.
and start asking them, and hopefully we get some great answers.
And you know what? Let me say this, and maybe my colleagues will maybe not be happy with me for asking or saying this, but I've always been the maverick of the group with the senior staff. with TU National. Ask the questions. Force us. Say, what the hell are you guys going to do about this, and how can we help? That lights the fire. I'm not afraid of your questions. I want your questions. And I think that we as a national organization have to do that. And then the locals with boots in the water and real perspectives, they can implement. But we all need to get together and work on this. And I think there's a sense of immediacy and it's an opportunity for us to band together. Because look, on the one hand, I just talked to you about all the people who want to use the river. Where are they going to go?
Yeah.
Right. Need has never been greater.
Yeah.
Sorry, that's my soapbox. And actually, don't tell anybody that I told you to say.
No, but the way that you said it, you know, what can we do about it and how can we help versus people saying, what are you going to do about it?
Yeah.
Like put the work on somebody else to take care of the problem.
So true. I think we are in an era where people need to step up, for sure.
It's our future. And
Hey, other questions? And if somebody wants to get the shepherd's crook and yank me off or tell me, you know, that I need to shut up or whatever, I'm not going to be offended with that either. So, but I'm happy to keep rolling. If people have questions, I love this. It's my favorite stuff.
Kirk, Ron's got a question about the Red Book and the Black Book. Do you have any plans to issue an electronic format?
Well, we do have a Kindle version of the Red Book, and we will have a Kindle version or electronic version of the Black Book too. So yes, both.
I'll buy them both.
Thank
I
you.
love Kindle.
Thank you.
Can you give us an update on the Pebble Mine?
Yeah, so I was in a meeting about this today. So in June, we thought it was a done deal and we were going to lose. That we had it won at the end of the last administration, and the EPA had made a determination that it was, you know, they were going to enforce under their powers of the Clean Water Rule that this was not a mine that was going to happen. And then President Trump met with the governor of Alaska early in his term and reversed that. And the EPA obviously changed a lot in the last few years and so forth. And then it's kind of a Hail Mary in July. And credit where credit is due. Donald Trump Jr. has been to Alaska and fished at lodges up there and so forth, and other members of the administration. And we've been applying pressure from both sides. This has not been a partisan issue. It's been a very bipartisan issue. I mean, Republicans, Democrats, it's not been like table tennis going one side to the next. But they said, and the EPA advised in July, that this mine could not happen and could not be permitted under the way it's proposed, as it was proposed then. So that the mining company had to come back with mitigation plans, that they had to say, well, a mitigation plan is, okay, if I screw this up, I fix this part of it, you know. But you can't mitigate perfect because it's a pristine wilderness. Stick with me here. So we felt really, really good that, okay, this is a great reversal. Like now, not only had the previous administration given it the thumbs down, now the Trump administration has essentially given it the thumbs down. And the mining companies have to prove that they can mitigate and fix things up and, you know, make it all good if they screw up. And we thought that that was an impossible hurdle to climb. Then we caught the CEO of the mining company talking about what his real plans were, and they got him on tape and they put him on, made that public, and he had to resign, basically. So we had that was September. Today, the mine did submit a mitigation plan that they says meets the needs of what the Army Corps of Engineers has asked us to do. All I know is at this point, both sides feel confident that they're going to win. we feel more confident than we've ever felt that this mine you can't mitigate, you can't fix perfect. And they've been exposed and this and that. And as long as the administration sticks to their guns and says what they're going to do and follows through with what they're going to do, it's a done deal. Weird things are happening right now, and people are pissed off, and other things are I'll believe it when I see it. That said, it could be dead as a doornail. We won't hear until middle of December 15th, thereabouts. When we hear that, it could be dead as a doornail, or we could be back to fighting it, and there's another administration coming in a month that we think will be sympathetic to protecting Bristol Bay. And the fight goes on. So we can either win, that's a long story, but it's probably the most detailed story anyone's ever given you about this, or gave you all the inside scoop. We can either win and have it be done in about a month, or we can be fighting again, but still feel pretty good about our chances. Does that answer enough?
Thank you.
Actually reminds me of the environmental impact statement for the Two Forks Dam here in Colorado, because the mitigation plan, essentially you can't make up a mitigation plan for a one-of-a-kind resource.
That's right. That's exactly right. So we can either be in victory formation and taking the knee in a month, or we will have to mount another drive and score another touchdown, but we feel confident that we have the offense to do that. So that's the end opinion on Pebble. Other questions for me? I have a rule that if it goes like 5 seconds or more, that means nobody's got any questions. All right, well, that's 5. So,
Kurt, this was great. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing your insights. Again, I'm going to ask any other questions. Okay.
Thank you very much. I really enjoyed the talk. I have your book. Looking forward to the black one.
oh, thank you so much. And I wish I could show you the black one. I can just show you the manuscript right now, but it's going to be good. I promise.
Give us something to look forward to.
Well, thank you all for your great questions.
It's kind of like the Beatles albums. You got the red one and the white one and the black one.
The next time you give a talk to us, maybe we can all bring our books and you can sign it.
Oh yeah.
I'll be there.
Kirk, you might see in the background my University of Michigan pennant up there.
Yeah. Go blue.
Go blue. That's right. for next year.
Next year.
Next year.
Well,
All
Kurt,
right.
one final question, please, Kurt.
Sure.
You may have gotten a chat directly, something about Tasmania.
Yes. And the question is, well, Malcolm Cross he organized the World Championships in Tasmania last year when they had them, and I went down the year before and met Malcolm and stayed at his house and visited, and now I call him Uncle Melk. I mean, he's just the nicest gentleman in the world. And the question is, do I have plans to return? And I think I answered it a little bit earlier. You might have missed it, but I'll say it again. The first place I'm going to go when I feel comfortable getting on a big, transcontinental flight is going to be Tasmania. So it's that magic a place.
Interesting.
Long way to go.
Oh, yes, that's a long flight.
That's a big yes.
Kirk, I'd like to get your contact information to follow up on that article for angling trade, possibly.
Yeah, sure. So the best way to get a hold of me is still through my TU for Angling Trade or otherwise, but it's just my name. It's Kirk.Deeter@tu.org.
Okay.
So it's like everybody else in TU. It's first name dot last name @tu.org.
I think for Trout Magazine too, the interplay between the Headwaters chapter and Cutthroat chapter would be an interesting sidebar, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I'm all over it. I'm already interested in that one.
That would be a really good one for inter-chapter partnerships.
You probably saw the little thought bubble come up over my head.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I saw you were interested.
yeah, we'd like that.
Yeah, Kurt, how can we promote that a little better?
Just follow up with me directly and let me know what's going on.
Okay,
And we'll
got
make a
it.
story. Either one of you want to write a story, or you want me to put one of my writers on it. Just let me know what's cooking and what you want to do.
and do we have, okay, you said your contact information, we have that.
Yep.
Yeah, we have it.
Okay, we will do it.
Great.
Thank you all.
Okay, thank you.
It's been a fun
Motion.
night. I really appreciate it.
Thanks again, Kurt. Motion to adjourn? Richard, second.
Oh, I so move.
So,
Second.
Hey, everybody, have a good holiday.
and stay safe.
Thanks,
Happy
Kirk.
holidays, everybody.
And
Yes, everyone stay safe.
And George,
Thank you very much.